Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today at the fifth webinar. And this one's going to be on tips and tricks for Bixby views. So I think probably a lot of you guys have started building your capsules. You've played around with some templates or some other stuff. But now it's time to really start to try to make your capsules look better. And for today's presentation, it's going to be me. I'm a developer evangelist for Bixby, a winner of a 2019 internal hackathon. And I have 4 too many cats. Some of them might be joining today during the presentation, but we'll see. They can be a little camera shy. And with me, we have Roger.
Hey everyone, so I'm a senior developer evangelist for Viv Labs, and we had a hackathon like this just last year with the beta version of Bixby. And that was before I was working for Samsung, and I actually won it. So maybe I can give you a little bit of thoughts and ideas there. I am the father of 2 teenage daughters, and I am a UC Berkeley graduate. So I just got to say, go Bears. But back to Jonathan.
All right, and there are Twitter handles. I don't know why it's a tongue twister for me, but you can follow us at those at John without the H and at Roger Kibbe. So the first thing I'm going to show you guys is the demo code that I'm going to be using today during this webinar. And you can
Jonathan, can I jump in 1 second and say something? That if anyone has any questions, please use the chat window and enter your questions there. And after Jonathan is done, I'll collate all those questions and ask them, and we'll help you answer them.
Yep, that's right. If you guys have any questions about what we're talking about or about DevJam, just toss them in the chat and we'll get to them. So here is the demo code. It's going to be at github.com at our Bixby developers GitHub, and it's going to be a result view tutorial. So this one also has a YouTube video associated with it that you guys can code along to. And the completed code, at least the one that I'm presenting today, is going to be in the enhanced branch. So just do a git clone and then git checkout enhance, standard git stuff to get the exact same code that I'm going to be showing today. So for today, let's say you've kind of built some of the plumbing for your capsule and you have, this data. In this case, we're going to use pets. And here we have the pet. If you guys can read it, you got name, species, and you have your pet modeling as well. I'm going to give a quick demonstration of the capsule as well. So we can have right here, show me some pets.
Here are 7 adorable pets.
And you can see that this is a simple capsule that shows you obviously some pets that are hard-coded in there. And you can click on a pet.
This is Moxie. Moxie works very hard every day to become Instagram famous. Shameless plug at moxie.the.calico. After a tough life on the streets,
and you can see this user interface here. So I'm going to be giving a quick explanation of what all these components are, kind of how to get started with Bixby views, and basically to build something that looks like this, looks with different, UI components throughout. So yeah, let's go back to the presentation. And the first thing that, a lot of people ask are, what are Bixby views? And there's really 2 types of views in Bixby. There's input views, which basically is a view that pops up to help users put in their input into Bixby. And here we have just 2 examples that are kind of, on the same wavelength as the pets capsule is what kind of pet are you looking for? In this case, you can either click, or for this form, you can input it into that type of form. The other type of view we have are result views. So result views are when you kind of reach the end of an action and you want to show the user their result. And there's a few ways to kind of handle that. In this webinar, we'll be going over the list view along with the detailed view. So when you saw, when you do show me pets, you'll see here, this is a list view of pets. So you can see there's more than one pet. And when you click on one of these pets, this is the detailed view, which shows details about one of these pets. And both of these views are result views. So, you've kind of reached your results of multiple pets, and then you can click on one to specifically show one pet. And why do we use result views? Without result views, you're going to get screens like this. And if you click on one of these things, you're going to go to this screen. And obviously, no user is really going to understand what's going on here. We can kind of tell what they are. They're basically structures or some kind of JSON type data. But after just some styling, you can transform this data into these obviously very aesthetically pleasing views in comparison. So just a forewarning, I will be going kind of quickly through this because there's a lot of slides and there's a lot of things to talk about in views. But there's going to be a lot of additional learning resources. And this is more just like a preview of how you can really get started and get started in working with views in Bixby. So I did kind of demonstrate the show me some pets. Now just to kind of explain kind of a quick summary of the capsule. When you have this utterance, it dispatches the action find pets. Excuse me. And since it finds multiple pets, it shows this list view. And just to go back to the code real quick, we can go look here at the find pets action. This is the action that gets called when we ask Bixby to find pets. And this action goes through, does some JavaScript to fetch these pets, and then returns all those pets to the users in this list. So that's kind of what's going on in terms of the plumbing. Then we also have the capacity to just show a single pet, both through an NL utterance or by clicking on a specific pet. And this will start find pets with the name as an optional input. And because the name is provided, it will filter it out and it will find the appropriate pet, in this case, Moxie. So the next quick thing that we need to touch upon before we really dive into the views are layout macros. So if any of you guys have done some kind of or any type of web development like React or something like that, you use fragments to reuse throughout the rest of your web application. And in Bixby, this is how we often handle layout macros as well. So each one of these thumbnails is actually a UI fragment. So it's a layout macro. And here you can see the name of the file. It's going to be petsummary.layout.bxb. And over here, this entire result view is also a layout macro. Basically an entire page in Bixby you can make as a layout macro as well. This one is called the petdetails.layout.bxb. And just to show you those files, we can do a quick, okay, so I guess the command P is not working, but we have our layout macros right here. We have pet details, and this is the details page like this. And we have the pet summary, and this is a card for right here. And we have the overall view, which is this result view. And speaking of the overall view, this is kind of how you get started with the result view. You'd right click this, select new view, and then you'd name it accordingly. I usually name it based on the concept that I'm trying to show a view for. Then you would add the match key. So when Bixby matches a pet, it'll show this result view specifically. And then inside here, you have the render key. And this is where the rest of the stuff happens. And here you can see the keys: layout macro, pet summary. This is the thumbnail cards. And here you can see the layout macro for pets details, where basically these layout macros get called. In this case, if there's just one pet, you show the pet details. In this case, if there's a list of pets, you show the pet summaries, or each one is a pet summary. So that's just a rough, a quick overview of that. So let's dive into the list view. And the list view is this view, as I mentioned earlier. And as I mentioned earlier, each card is a layout macro. So what this does is it loops through all the pets that are available, and then it renders it on your screen using the petsummary.layout.bxb. And here we can see that happening right here. List of pets, where each pet, and then you have the layout macro. So you're just calling a layout macro for each pet, and then you create this card. And if we go to that specific layout macro, which is right here, this pet summary, we can see that it's an image card. This image card right here, obviously it's a zoomed in version of it. And there's an image background, and you can see Moxie's cute little face right there. And you can see slot 1, slot 2, and slot 3. You can add some additional text, along with single lines, so you can add inline images along with the text, which we'll get into more detail in terms of how you can do that, add inline images along with various text options that you have. But yes, this is just an image card that you can loop through and just show the 7 pets. So the code itself is right here. Should you guys need any sample code or see how this is done, absolutely go and grab the code from the GitHub repo and play around with it. So the next thing is I'm going to demonstrate a highlighted result. And right here you can see how it returns the 7 pets, but now you can see how Moxie is featured and the other pets are down here. And we do this by adding a highlights key to the list of that we had earlier. So if we go right here, we can just, right there under list of. So right here, let's just copy and paste this code that I have commented out and uncomment that. And now when we ask Bixby to show me some pets, it should highlight Moxie right here as the perfect pet. And just like earlier, you can click on this one and you'll be able to see that Moxie is the featured pet. You can also see some other pets down here, which they're just lumped into more results because that's exactly what highlights do. So highlights, I like using them to really kind of give the user a recommendation. There's another key called filter by, which you can use to determine which pet is featured. But in this case, the default select is just to select the first pet that's returned. So that's Moxie. And yeah, that's the highlighted result and the list view. So now let's dive into the detailed view. And just to reinforce the detailed view, that's when you click on a specific pet and then you're in this page. So the detailed view is made up of a lot of different stuff. First, we have the image and the text on this screen. So this image right here is a picture of Moxie, and the data for it is like this. And in this case, you can use an HTTP URL, or you can use a local image that you have to put in the assets folder. So right here, we can see assets, images, and then you can see all these different pictures of the cats, of the pets, so on and so forth. And here you can see the data for it under, in this case, Moxie's is under the image key. And you can see how this path is actually assuming that it's going to be in the assets folder. So you don't have to do assets/images/moxie.jpg. You would just do /images/moxie.jpg. And here in the biography, you'll see that this is 2 types of text. And I wanted to demonstrate both types. The first one is a single line. And single lines are exactly as they sound. They are a single line of text. And if this single line of text goes off the screen, it'll get concatenated into ... So usually you want to use it to display short amounts of text as obviously a single line. And the next is a paragraph where it's capable of having more than one line. And that's where you would show more information, like in this case, how Moxie is trying to become Instagram famous. Follow her at moxie.thecalico. Yeah, right there. And a little biography right there as well. So that's when you would use single line versus paragraph. And just to show you the code as well for that, let's hop into the pet details.layout. And you can see, right here, we have the image, right? So in this case, we're also, we have an if clause for an image carousel if more than one image is provided. But if we go down to the biography, which is somewhere right here. Okay, I just used a paragraph, but you can use a single line for that as well. But you can see how these are just 2 paragraphs, paragraph for biography and paragraph for this. And you can see I can set the styling as well, different style keys. That's all in the documentation, which I will be providing links for in terms of useful links for the documentation when it comes to building your views. Let's move on. We have Hboxes and Vboxes. Hboxes are horizontal spans across the entire screen. So these 2 right here, this UI element is 2 separate Hboxes. The first Hbox is broken into 2 Vboxes. So this Vbox on the left is just some text, and this Vbox on the right is a single line because that's how you get an image into there. And this is pretty powerful because if you've ever used like CSS frameworks like Bootstrap or whatever, they have a grid system. And this is basically Bixby's version of a grid system where you can declare an Hbox, so basically a row with its columns inside, which are known as VBoxes. And if you guys can't tell, my background is in web development. That's why I often draw comparisons between Bixby and the web. So yeah, you'll hear that a lot from me. Now, Hboxes, I like using them to display statistics as well. So like in this case, you have Moxie stats with height, weight, age, gender, and each of these is just a series of VBoxes inside an Hbox, so basically columns and rows that show the height, weight, age, and gender respectively. In the code right here in the pet details.layout, which is the detail view, you can see this code snippet for the stats for Moxie, right? And along with some VBox keys, the content inside the VBox, and then you put multiple VBoxes in there. So you can see how this is the height, and you can see how this is grabbing it from the pet details, and then you can see weight, age, gender, so on and so forth. And you can see the other more simple Hbox right here, which is this Moxie plus the little icon. And just also, some of you guys might have noticed that there's a rating thing here. I just added that also just as an example of how you can do a rating system. We actually do have a library for it as well, but you know, whatever floats your boat in that case. Next thing that really adds a lot to your UIs are dividers and spacers. And you can use those to really help distinguish, you know, one element from another and like kind of like where you want to organize your data. So dividers are this horizontal line that spans through most of the UI. And, you know, they're this little faded thing, and they add some padding on top and bottom. And spacers add extra padding to provide even more emphasis between different UI elements and to make things look less cluttered. So right here, you can see that it's appropriate to use a spacer here to add some room to give the biography a little bit more breathing space, so it's not as cluttered next to the statistics that you're showing up here. And as usual, I'll just show you guys the code for that, where that code lives. You have this divider and you have this spacer, which separates this line from this biography. And you can see there's no spacer above, so you can tell that there's less room in between this element and this line compared to this, where you add the spacer. So you can only add like one spacer at a time, so two spacers actually don't do anything, just FYI. And now you can also do for each loops in the UI elements. So oftentimes your data is returned as an array, very common. And what you can do is you can actually iterate through them using a for each and then display them accordingly. In this case, we have Moxie's interests. So let's hop back to the data real quick, and I can show you, let's see, where is the data? Right here. You can see that the interest is returned as this array. Excuse me. Sorry about that. And right here, you can see that this array has been displayed accordingly as a bunch of individual lines. So let's go back down, and I'll just show you where the for each loop lives right here. There it is. It's pretty simple. So for each pet.interests, and each interest is known as an interest, you can render a paragraph. And you can put more than one thing in here, like you can put divider, spacer, cell card, cell array, whatever UI elements you actually want to use to render through here. But in this case, it's just simple text and a very simple example of using a for each right here. So that's what that is. And yep, right here, you could just see it iterates through. And next we have the cell card. So I do want to add a big caveat here. And if you guys were here for the third webinar, you'll know that on-click elements need to be clickable. So that means that these elements with these this background light box, when it's in Bixby, it looks like you can click on it. So that's why we're pretty strict on using these elements only if you can click on them, right? So if you can't click on them, we will reject your capsule for that reason. So anyway, this is just an example of using a clickable element in your capsule, right? And this is a cell card, which are commonly used. And you can see you have a slot 1, slot 2. Slot 1, you can put an image, and there's up to 3 slots. The third slot will go here, and you could put an image there if you want the image on the right. And if you click on that, you'll see that it would show you all the cats in the capsule. So let's just go ahead and click on that. There you go. And now it takes you to the cats in the capsule. And yeah, so miscellaneous. The next thing that we should talk about is punching out, providing attribution links. So let's say you need to provide additional details or reference something. You have to use an attribution link. Don't use these to punch out because this is kind of the criteria. Like, people need to know when they're going to leave Bixby, and this is the UI element to do that with, and this is the attribution link. So when you click on this, it will take you to Moxie's Instagram, where you guys can follow her if you want. So there it is, Moxie's Instagram. Now on your mobile, it'll obviously punch you out to your mobile browser of choice, but that's it, that's her Instagram. So you can see that that would be an appropriate use case for this attribution link. And typically we want users to know when they're leaving Bixby, so that's why you have to use those to punch out. And right here, just some little flair. You can add some legal text at the bottom. This is just a paragraph with different styling when you select the style as legal. And I will show the code for both of those real quick. We have the attribution link right here. So it also demonstrates just a simple if clause. If the attribution link exists, then display it. And you have the label, which is Moxie's Instagram, the link description. And then you have the URL that it punches out to, which is also in the data. And finally, the legal text is at the bottom. It's just a hard-coded paragraph. And this one's interesting because you can actually add line breaks in a paragraph. So you can do these, I think, \ns, and you'll see how it adds line breaks right there. And for some of you more astute fellows, you'll notice that there are emojis, which our views do support as well. So feel free to go crazy with the emojis if you so desire. And next we have the dialogue portion, and the this little portion. So right here, you'll notice that this is the display name in your metadata. And all these things affect the way your capsule looks and feels to the end user. So that's why it's important to be thematic and to choose appropriate names, so on and so forth. And the dialogue is really to focus on what Bixby is saying to you. And that's why it's important, for the appropriate things to be in the dialogue. And let's go into some do's and don'ts for when it comes to displaying result views. And the full version of this presentation was actually done by Sangmok, the creator of our UI system at Bixby. So be sure to check that out. There will be a link for it near the end. And here you can see do's and don'ts, right? Get straight to the point. And this is one example. Let's say if you were to find space resorts on Venus. On the left, you can see how it's very clear and concise data. You can see it's a Venus space spa with a rating of whatever. Here, although there's more information, it's actually pretty confusing to the user as to what they're looking at. Like, oh, I see, okay, that's the rating, right? And then here you have some, I guess it has a cryo spa, but either way, you can tell that this one is more cluttered and more confusing to look at. And the next one is this example, which is what's the air quality on Venus? And you want the dialogue and content to work together in this case. So here you can see that the air quality is good, and you can see this very emphasized here, it's good. And then you can see how, there's additional data that would tell you what makes it good or what makes it bad. And in this case, it's kind of information overload, and also it's just, I guess it just doesn't quite look as good. And this one, you need to deliver what the user wants. If you ask, where's Venus? You don't need an entire biography of Venus in this case. You'd want to know where's Venus in relationship to Earth, most likely, since I think most of us are not Martians. And right here you can see on the left, it does clearly tell us that Venus is located in the Milky Way galaxy, which is 162 million miles from Earth, instead of Venus is the second planet, blah, 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 and all this information about Venus. Okay, so we've done a bit on result views, but what about input views? The demo code that I'm going to be showing you guys for these input views can be found here at, this is actually on my GitHub for now, but it'll be John M. Pan /input-view tutorial, and everything is just in the master branch for this one. So I'll give a very quick run through, or sorry, demo of this survey capsule. Start. And we'll turn on Bixby's eloquent voice. So let's, okay.
What is your name?
And you can do, for example, Jonathan Pan.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Jonathan Pan. What is your email address?
My address is jpan@viv.ai.
When did you start using Bixby?
I started using Bixby a long time ago, before Bixby was a thing.
When are you planning to build something for Bixby?
I am planning to build something for Bixby right now for the next few days.
Do you like this capsule?
Yes, I do like this capsule.
What kind of tutorials would you like to see next? Any additional feedback?
State management session management in Bixby. By the way, that's the next tutorial that I'm making.
Here's what I found.
And here you can see, I did not make a result view for it, but you can see how those input views collected all this stuff, and then you'd be able to do something with this, right? You could toss it at an API, or you could, do something with it, right? So let's go over what you guys just saw. Here we have the first two parts of that form, which were both text inputs. First one is, collecting your name, and the next one is collecting your email. Now, email is very difficult to train with ASR, but sorry about that. But it is still useful for collecting emails, especially since you can type on these screens. You can actually type on them, and they're also useful for collecting other short datas like phone numbers and other very shorter strings. The next thing is okay. So the trainings for okay. I actually have the wrong graphic for that. Sorry about that. But anyway, we have the training here. So in order to train this one's pretty simple. You have to do an @prompt for training in order for voice to work for this input view. And I'm going to show you the training real quick because it's actually pretty important. So right here, we have name. So when the capsule is prompting for a name, so let's just do, can't type right now, start.
What is your name? You
can see how now it's waiting for a name from the user. So that's why it's @prompt for name. And then here you can just, type in some names, different lengths of names. In this case, I think I only have like 1 or 2 trainings for name. Robert Downey Jr., and then Bixby would interpret whatever you put there as Robert Downey Jr. And I should have a training for my name is something. Let's see, yes. So my name is Jonathan Pan, so then it would take anything else after my name is to be your input, because here we're setting that value to be name. So this is how you train for voice when it comes to this input view. Now this checkbox input view, you actually have to train for yes and no in this case. And you do that with the, let's see, yes, you do that right here. So at a like, when you're prompting for a like, right, you can set that to be that value. And here you actually have to make vocab for that like. So these are all the ways that, the checkbox can interpret it as true or as false, because the checkbox is expecting a true or false, answer no matter what. So here's some synonyms. If someone says, yeah, yes, I do like this capsule, etc. If they say any of these, they'll be interpreted as true by the checkbox. In this case, if people say no, nope, or no, this capsule sucks, it'll be interpreted as unchecked for the checkbox. So yes, right here we have forms, other types. We have the checkbox, which I just covered. Sorry, slightly out of order. And then we have the text area. So the text area is great for collecting longer bits of data from the user, like some kind of, a few sentences is typically recommended. So you have this, right? And you have the training for this. You can just assume that they'll put whatever in the checkbox. So you can just do, you can just train for like foobar, and so on and so forth. I think it's somewhere in here, but hopefully it is. Oh, feedback, yeah, right here, foobar. So whatever, people say at the feedback portion, it'll take it as an input. So the next thing is collecting dates. You have the date picker that I demonstrated and the calendar that I demonstrated as well. And for this, you actually have to use the viv.time library. So you have to import the viv.time library. And this date picker on the left, good for selecting single dates. You can specify date range and a starting date, along with disabling future dates or disabling past dates, so on and so forth, everything you'd expect from a date picker. This calendar here, great for collecting a range of dates, just like the other parameters you can set for the date picker, like start and stop date. You can set that for the calendar as well. So for those of you needing to, dive into collecting dates, that's how you guys would approach it. And if we go back to, if we check out the trainings for the dates, you can just train April 1st, 2019, along with some phrases like yesterday, and you just set those as time.datetime expression. So if we look at this right here, this training, and let's just close these real quick. Okay, okay. So right here we have, yes, the day before yesterday. You can just see that I just highlighted this whole thing and set it to time.datetime expression. That's when, it's the started date. So, I started using Bixby the day before yesterday as an example. And then you can train ranges of dates for the calendars like this, from January 1st to February 28th. So if we look at that training, let's see, it's somewhere around here. It is. You can see here from January 1st to February 28th, select the whole thing. For the calendar, it's expecting a time.date interval. So that's what you would set this node as. And there's a lot of autocomplete stuff, so you're not just left in the dark when it comes to finishing these trainings. And yeah. Okay, so I know that was a little fast, so that's why we have some additional learning resources here. And this here is the documentation for the result view elements. And I use this all the time when I build result views for Bixby. And right here, if we hop over to the documentation, not there. Okay, just in the search bar, type in content.section.content, and this little section will have all the different types of UI elements that you can put into your capsule. And you can see a lot of these will look familiar because we went over them. You have the attribution link, dividers, Hbox, images, so on and so forth. You can click on one of these to see some documentation examples and just see some applications along with some UI elements and how they look, so on and so forth, right? So then we have the same for the input view elements. So in here, just search for input-view, and you can just click on the first result. This one's a higher level, kind of what input views are. And then if you want to see the actual components that you can put in an input view, here they are. You have these components, autocomplete, calendar, so on and so forth. And finally, there's a good amount of sample code on our GitHub. Go check it out at github.com/Bixby developers. That's where we put a lot of our sample code. And definitely check out our YouTube channel. We have code along tutorials right here. You can see the result view and the input view tutorial. We're at the bottom there. And these are code alongs. These two tutorials use the capsules that I went over during this presentation. And if you're the type to learn when coding along, then those videos will be perfect for you. Otherwise, the sample code is there as well. So definitely check out our YouTube channel. A lot of great learning resources. And this webinar will also be posted there as well. And yeah, so the next upcoming events, tomorrow, we have an AMA on Reddit at the Samsung subreddit at 3 p.m. So if you guys want to ask how SideChef, basically developed for Bixby, how they built an awesome capsule, what they're seeing in terms of results from building their capsule, this would be a great time to kind of reach out on Reddit and just ask some questions like that. Our next webinar is going to be not on our usual Thursday or Friday cadence, because next week is obviously Thanksgiving. It's going to be next Tuesday, so just a few days from now. And I think I'm going to be hosting that one, but it's mainly going to be open office hours for those of you who might have some technical questions or just any questions to help push you guys over to the finish line for DevJam. And it's at the same Zoom link as this one, so I'll also tweet it as well. So if you guys are following me, you'll see that. And the Slack invite, I know we had a couple issues with like some of the links and stuff, but I think this link works as a Slack invite, tiny.cc/BixbyDevSlack. Hop in there if you guys have any questions, and feel free to ask us. You can reach out directly to Roger, myself. We're there as well. And yeah, thank you very much. I'm sure I've missed something, which I think, Roger will help. And now we're opening this up to Q&A. So yeah.
Okay, Jonathan, awesome job. That was a lot of material to cover. So I got asked, I think, 4 times this, publicly and privately, so we got to answer this. How many capsules are currently being, have been submitted to DevJam? I can go ahead and answer that.
Okay.
We're about somewhere near 100, probably a little over 100 right now. So there is plenty of room for you guys to go and submit more capsules. Remember, an individual is eligible to submit up to 4 capsules for the $300. So if you haven't submitted 4 capsules, feel free to get on it and do it, because there's plenty of room coming up. I will say we expect this Thanksgiving week, with people having extra time away from work, to be super busy. It's also the week before the end of it, so get on it. Okay, first question, other than that, is do I have to use input views in my capsule?
Okay. So you use input views to collect stuff from the user. And the short answer to that is no, not always. But if you have any type of required variables or required inputs, then yes, you do need to use an input view, because it's very easy for that action to be dispatched without an input, and then your capsule will break. So if you have required inputs, and you know what, since I'm still sharing my screen, I can just show you kind of like an action that would do that. Right here, start survey. You can see how all these are required. And that's why each of them have an input view. So short answer, if you require that input, yes, you do need to use an input view. If you don't require the input, no, you don't.
All right. The next question, can you put images into columns using Hbox instead of using image list and image carousel?
Yeah, so you can put images into Hboxes with single lines. However, you can only make them as large as the largest font size. It sounds a little unintuitive, but the sizing of the images in a single line is based on basically the font size, because the point of a single line was to have inline images with text, right? But yes, you can put 4 smallish images in a single line with an Hbox. But there is a pretty good UI element, which I think, is it called the image carousel? But yeah, let's hop over to that real quick. Hopefully this doesn't take me too long to find, but it's an image area card, image list. Yes, this one. So here you can see you can put 4 images like this horizontally next to each other if this is the effect you're going for, right here. So just provide it an array of images. So that's kind of, I see this used often for multiple images side by side.
Okay. In list of, can you pass the index of the position of the pet in the array to the layout macro?
Okay, so in order to, this is actually a good question. In order to reference the index, let's see, let's go to summary. Oh, okay, hang on, it's in here. Okay, so in terms of a list of, I'm actually not sure if you can reference the index exactly, but I do know you can reference it in, for example, a for each loop, right? So the syntax for a for each loop, which might be the same as the list of, is this. It's a little wacky, but it's that, just that. This is how you would reference the index. And you can also declare the index. So I might be able to give you a better answer specifically for list of, maybe another time. So feel free to ask that in Slack. And when I have some time to poke around at it, I can give you a better answer for list of specifically. But yeah.
Okay, there is a question about, and I'm going to answer this. When is store credit being sent to developers? We're going to start sending that this afternoon. We're going to go in the order in which eligible submissions were approved. All right. Is there an internal Bixby API through which a capsule can set alarms programmatically on the phone?
So no, I would say the quick answer to that is, oh, no. I mean, in terms of completely internal, I mean, there might be, but you know, unfortunately, that's not really available to third-party developers right now. But you know, I'm sure there's some way to do it. You can also do like kind of deep links, things like that. I've seen people figure that out on our platform. So you know, those can.
Can I just say no? There isn't.
Yeah.
You should make a feature request for that. Actually, I know there's an open feature request for this, so you should upvote it. So I think what you're trying to say is I want to programmatically set up an alert or alarm to happen later after I've exited the capsule. Upvote the feature request on bixbydevelopers.com, find feature request and upvote it. Okay, next question. What is the best image size to use? Are there any minimum or maximum sizes in pixels?
So for an image that spans over the entire horizontal duration of the view, so just to show you an example, like
This is Moxie.
Moxie, like this one, it's suggested to be at least 300 pixels wide. So you know, however else you want to structure that, that's up to you. But just like web, the smaller the image is, the better. If you don't need transparency, use JPEGs. If you do need transparency, you can use PNGs, but they are larger. And for smaller images like thumbnails and things like that, I usually find like maybe 100 pixels maximum for these, but typically around 64 pixels is good for thumbnails like this. So hopefully that kind of answers your question, but it really depends on the element itself. So yeah.
And there's no maximum size, it'll just scale to the screen.
Yeah.
It's worth noting that the phones are higher resolution than most TVs, but because the screen is small, you don't actually see that. Okay, here is a bit of a longer question. My capsule got rejected because I'm using a result view and not, he says layout macro, I think he means input view, and not an input view. The team mentioned that once a result view is shown to the user, that user is no longer locked into a conversation. If I'm in a game loop, like in the quiz template, can I simply add conversation drivers to my result view? And will this be considered a lock into the user for the conversation?
So if you don't, so, okay, this is actually a nuanced question and determine or based on your scenario. But generally speaking, if you're in a result view and you add these conversation drivers like this, it will lock you into that result view for like, I don't know, 16 to 20 something seconds, which is usually long enough to handle most people playing or using your capsule. So yes, I would add conversation drivers to lock the user in. And you know, let's say your capsule doesn't have like appropriate conversation drivers all the time. You can add just like a top level help command. I see that used commonly to lock people into a result view. So yeah.
Okay, next question. When would you use a cell card with an on-click on a detail view versus a conversation driver? Is there a best practice?
Yeah, so actually, that's a great question right here. For click me, show me more cats, this is actually not a great use case for this. This is better as a conversation driver. You could just put that as cats right here, and then you could click on cats and it would show you cats, right? But I kind of forced an on-click example in here. So an on-click, a very good use case of on-click might be where, you know, the command kind of looks too long for a conversation driver, like, or to, for example, do something else like edit a form, right? Edit your name if you can have that ability to edit a name, to edit like your email address, or to, you know, kind of submit the form, for example, in a confirmation status. But yeah, so that's a great question. It's a bit nuanced, but the most important thing about that, whether you use an on-click component or put it in a conversation driver, is to don't put it in both places. Because if you put an on-click here that says, show me more cats, and you have a conversation driver here that also says, show me more cats, that's a very redundant experience to the user. But if you prefer it to be a button like this, keep it as just a button. If you prefer as a conversation driver, keep it as just a conversation driver.
Okay. Sorry, I was keeping up in questions and lost my own place. Let's see. Okay. If I use an element that looks like it's clickable, did you say it must be clickable? Is it okay if I use it just because I like the look of it?
Unfortunately, it has to be clickable. So we have to really reinforce this fact. If you use a card, most of the card components, they have to be clickable and they have to do something when you click on them. So you'll have to convert it to non-clickable elements. There's a few layouts that are impossible to replicate, but most of them you can replicate perfectly without, the clickable background. So for example, this cell card here, you can use a cell area to replicate that, and it won't have the light box behind it. So absolutely do not use on-click elements as unclickable UI elements. They have to be clickable.
Okay. If I'm making a list with an image with a card view, which is clickable, and others that are not clickable, I can try to replicate with Hbox, Vbox, but the image sizing portions aren't the same. Are improvements in the pipeline for the image in Hbox and Vbox coming?
So that would be another great feature request to ask for. You guys can do that, I believe. Let's go to the documentation. I think it's
Right there.
in, is it here?
Support.
Report? Right here, request a new feature or feedback. This is a great place to go. We do look at this regularly, so be sure to request that feature. And the more people that upvote it, the more that product takes it seriously and will, throw it into the pipeline.
Okay. Just a couple of commentary. Would be nice if all images supported autofit. Make a feature request there. And then there's a bunch of kudos over. There's a link to a UI guide that was shared, and there was a bunch of kudos, and there was a question of who created it. There's a whole UI team. They probably all did it. I will definitely pass that on that you guys liked it. They don't hear much from the outside world. Sometimes the internal developers, they love to hear that they did a good job.
Yeah.
There's also a request for the sketch template available in some other format. So make a feature request for that.
Okay.
I don't know enough to answer that at all, like what you can put sketch in. Okay, back to the main questions. It seems that attribution link is the only way in the docs to jump to a browser, but it seems some capsules I've seen are able to do that with a compound card on click. How do they do that?
So on click, you can kind of set your goal to be punch out, and then you have to import this library and stuff. It's typically not recommended. I do know there are some capsules on the marketplace that do that. But generally for third-party capsules, we limit them to kind of attribution links. So, that's kind of the best answer I can give for that for now. I don't know if there's any sample code on our GitHub, but I think there will be soon for that type of punch out, or at least the share via function, which is similar. So yeah, I would recommend sticking to the attribution links if you need to hop out of your browser for now. So yeah.
All right. There's a little bit of commentary about some things that I'll address. Then how can you put an image as a background behind other layout?
Okay. So there's a few UI elements where you can put an image as the background. That would be, for example, the image card, along with, you might be able to do that with the compound card as well. But they are limited in scope in terms of the types of UI elements you can have with text, for example, on the front. So yeah, that's really all I can really say about it. But for the most part, most images, you can't really put stuff on them. Like this one, can't really put much on it. So yeah.
Okay. What's the difference between visibility being private and public and default, and how does prompt, I think he's missing context. How does that prompt context work?
Okay, so that's a great question, actually. And when it comes to visibility being private and public, when it's private, that means that only this model right here, pet, has access to this property here, which is image, right? And excuse me, when by default the visibility is public. So let's take this name as an example. This name is public. In other words, it's kind of treated as a global variable. let's say I do show me Moxie, right? Now Bixby as a whole knows that I'm looking for a pet with the name Moxie. And then, it can pass that into this, into this action here as one of the inputs. So that's just a very, very quick synopsis. This is actually pretty complex, in terms of the data flow, in terms of understanding it. But that's a very quick introduction for it.
Okay. And I'd say if you want more detail, drop us a line on Slack. But fundamentally, can you take the shortcut of not defining the concept? Then if you can use private. Otherwise, you would just use default visibility, which is public. And that would be anything you defined a concept for. Okay. How do views filter input from a user so only certain utterances are considered at a given moment?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
How do views filter input from a user so only certain utterances are considered at a given moment?
Okay, so typically you can have, when you train for your utterances, depending on the goal that you set it as, that utterance will dispatch that goal, right? You can either set it to be the end result, or you can set it to be the action itself. So let's say you have two actions that do kind of similar stuff. You would explicitly say this utterance does this goal. When you're in a result view, it gets a little tricky because then everything is actually at this top level. So let's say you have find pets or create a pet. When you're in a result view, there's no way to kind of not allow the user to do one action or the other. So in other words, you'd have to handle it through error handling and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, hopefully that answers your question. But yeah, that's kind of the general gist of it.
Okay. Let's see, there's a suggestion for a template, a big image gallery that handles a lot of images. I'd say, as we always say, put it as a feature request. Okay. And love to, when you put in a feature request, you might actually put in your use case or why you think that would be valuable. Because if we actually understand, I can see this one seems pretty obvious to me, but sometimes we get feature requests and we're like, it's hard to conceive of what they'd be useful for. But include that when you do that. That's sometimes very helpful. Not only to us, but other people who may upvote your feature request. Is today going to be on a YouTube recording? Is there going to be a YouTube recording of today's webinar? Yes.
Yes.
All YouTube, yes.
YouTube/C/Bixby developers. It'll be posted on our YouTube channel. So I'll post it most likely today sometime. Yeah.
And then it looks like the last question, when are UI texts not read by Bixby's voice?
So, okay, let's show Moxie real quick. And let's turn on the dialogue.
This is Moxie. Moxie works very hard every day to become Instagram famous. Shameless plug at moxie.the.
So right here, you can see how this dialogue is specified as this is Moxie, kind of as an introduction. And you can see how Bixby starts reading the biography. So you can do that through the speech key. Let's see, where did I put the speech for this? Did I make a dialogue? Okay, I did. So right here, we're right here in this block, this else case where you have one pet, right? And here you can see the template is what's displayed at the top dialogue. This is Moxie. So in this case, it chose this one. So this is pet name, Moxie. But then we have the speech key. Oh, speaking of Moxie, oh, no, she walked away. Then you have the speech key where you can see how it will read, this is Moxie, and then the pet biography. So this is how you would handle controlling what is read and what is displayed here. And here, my goal was to have the dialogue work with the result view in order to, create a better experience. So you can hear Bixby talk about Moxie, and also you can scroll around, look at her pictures more easily, versus having a giant dialogue block right here that would take up over half the screen. So yeah, you use a template, and then that's what's displayed in the dialogue section, and then you set a speech key, and that's what's read to the user. Yeah, Roger, you still there?
I'm talking into the mute. So I'm going to do one more question, and we got to do the raffle. So
Okay.
we'll answer the rest of the questions on Slack that come. So keep them coming. Don't stop. We'll answer them on Slack. How does the parent-child relationship work with view, match, and actions?
View, match, and okay. So right here, you want to, let's see, we can go to the view. Well, the match logic works the same for dialogues, but here you can see how it's matching a pet, right? So when you look at this action right here, you can see that find pets outputs pet, right? So when this action happens, its goal is to output this pet. And here you can see that this will match it, and then it'll read this dialogue appropriately. And that's the same with views. Use the same type of match right here. I just didn't specify from what output for this one. In this case, I specified for the dialogue from output find pets as the action. So hopefully that answers your question. You want to match whatever is being outputted by the action. That's what you want to do when it comes to matching.
All right. All right. I think that is it for questions. So we're going to switch over to the raffle.
Okay. So I guess I can stop sharing, right?
All right. And I'm going to switch to video for me. Hang on. All right. So, okay. So we're going to do the raffle. And we have 53 eligible capsules for this week's raffle. And so this is for the $500 prize. You need to choose a number, random number between 1 and 53. So I'm going to ask Bixby for it. So, whoops, let me turn it back on. I need a number between 1 and 53.
Processing some equations. Okay, your number is 31.
31. Let me look up the lucky winner. 31 is Piyush Hari for Famous Rhymes. So Piyush, I don't know if you're on this, but you won the $500 raffle prize.
Woo!
There. All right. And I believe we have a second raffle for $500, if I'm not mistaken. So let's go do that again. All right. I need a number between 1 and 53.
1 second, just double checking my math. All right, looks like your number is 24.
24. Shay Armstrong gets it for Stream Picker.
Oh.
All right, so Piyush and Shay, you are the lucky winners of this week's raffle, $500 winners each. And you guys come on back. I think we're doing one raffle next week. And then like Jonathan said, next week is open Q&A, no presentation there. So thank you, everyone. We'll take a look at the questions and answer those on Slack, any of that we didn't answer. And that's about it. Jonathan, parting words?
No, thank you, everyone, for joining. We'll see you guys in the next few webinars.